lot of other stuff, but we're going to focus on the EU. Let's do a bit of a straw poll, because depending on the answer here, I'll just shut up and sit down. So how many people are contemplating voting to remain in the EU? That was easy. Okay, good night everyone. Okay, now all the polls are suggesting that the Brexit campaign is starting to take a bit of a lead in the polls. I mean, even suggesting that the Brexit lead may be as much as 10 points, but don't get too carried away, because the government is already starting to put in place the means to manipulate the vote. As I'm sure you saw in the last couple of days, the website crashed in the last 24 hours where people could register online. So they extended it for 24 hours, and in that 24 hours, nearly 500,000 people allegedly registered. So basically this is all being set up for manipulation, probably through the postal vote. But there is a distinct possibility that it may be manipulated, but not as most people think. So what I'm going to try and do over literally 30 minutes is sow some seeds with you, because the outcome may be very different to what people are anticipating. And you know, everything you've been listening to today, I think, is going to become even more relevant after the 23rd. Because, you know, it's going to be, if you like, I think a starting gun for the population of this country to start getting involved. Because if we don't get involved, then basically it's going to be taken as a mandate for the ruling parasites to destroy this country. And the only thing that, well, the only people that can stop them are basically the population of this country. So the next part of the poll is, how many people right now would actually state that you're proud to be British? Really? Proud to be British, okay? Okay, proud to be human, yes, proud to be human, right? Okay, well, you know, I don't know what it is that makes us proud to be British, but, you know, I've been living back in this country after more than a decade overseas. I've been back in this country now for 15 years, and I have to say that the country that I came back to was very different than the country I left. And what I've seen over the last 15 years is the country go places I never imagined that this country would ever go. It was probably there at some level, and I just didn't see it. But now it's so blatant, it's just an embarrassment. Anyone got any idea what this might be? On the screen here?
Bailiffs.
That's not my front door.
Bailiffs.
The bailiffs, exactly. Well, this is a situation that occurred literally a few months ago now in suburbs of Manchester. And this is the lady, May Appleton, with one of her 3 sons, who were evicted from their house. 82 she is. They were evicted from their house because the housing association said they were serial hoarders and that the house was a fire risk. Now, having seen the pictures of the inside of the house, there was clearly a bit of a problem. But this housing association, the only way in which they thought they could deal with it was by evicting them. And thanks to a massive public outcry, they were evicted on the Friday, but by the following Tuesday they were back in their house. But this is one of the implications of the privatisation of our social services, and in this case housing services. And the purpose behind this is twofold. One, it is an EU directive that all nationalised, all state-owned services are privatised. There's not one single piece of legislation that says that. It's dotted through various treaties, through various regulations and through various directives. But it's systematic that everything that was once state-owned has to be privatised. And one of the benefits, of course, for privatising is that the private companies are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So if this was managed by the local authority, then the local authority would be required to respond to any Freedom of Information requests. But because it's a private housing company, it's a private-public partnership, there's no partnership, of course, it's a pure corporatist entity where those who are on the senior management team earn outrageous salaries, whilst the people who live in their houses basically just suffer at their hands because, as I'm sure many of you can attest, the workmanship that is put into these houses is pathetic, it's shoddy, because there's only one bottom line, and that's profit, i.e. so that these people can claim as much for themselves. So this is Judith Burbidge, Director of Neighbourhoods, who was the lady who took the decision that May Appleton should be evicted. So this is the state of this country right now. And that's just obviously the thin end of a very fat wedge, because we have a massive underclass, a growing underclass, and the attitude of the corporatocracy is that unless you are making a direct contribution to the corporatocracy by running on that treadmill for as many hours a day as they can possibly get you running on the treadmill, unless you are able to do that, then you are, in the words of Henry Kissinger, a useless eater. And you have no role in society. There is no justification for you sucking in oxygen that could be better used by somebody who is contributing to the corporatocracy. And that's why we see, this kind of attitude. The Department of Work and Pensions. I was in a petrol station over in East Lancashire a few months ago, and we were at the coffee machine, and this lady walks up behind us, and she's wearing a DWP badge. And as I turned and saw it, I said to her, "You're very brave wearing that quite so openly." And she went, "Oh yes," and turned it round. They're embarrassed. They're embarrassed because anybody here work for the DWP? Or anybody going to admit to working for the DWP? Because basically, you literally have to put your humanity in the locker room when you go into work. Because the DWP rewards the front of house people by how much they are able to sanction people, by how much they are able to retain benefits that are rightfully owed to the people that are basically making the claims. And we've all seen the cases of suicide that have been directly attributed to benefits being cut, or people that are basically fundamentally incapable of working because of their physical or mental health, and yet basically they are ruled as fit for work, and basically they just can't live with it. And this is our society, this is our caring society. And why is this happening? Because we, the collective we, are letting it happen. It's mission creep. We hear of one or two situations like that, but now it's literally endemic. And it's, thank goodness for groups like Real Change and Beat the Bailiffs that are actually getting out there and challenging the system and trying to somehow, little by little, redress the excesses of this pernicious society. And I'm sorry, but right now I find very little that makes me want to say that I'm proud to be British. When I was travelling the world 20 odd years ago, and I had one of those big thick passports, real passports, not these red cover things, there was a pride in being British. That British passport basically got you sort of way through pretty much anywhere, and we were treated with respect in many countries around the world. We have no entitlement to any of that respect. The devastation that this country has caused throughout the world is a legacy that we and future generations are undoubtedly going to have to live with one way or another. Much of what is occurring is being driven by an agenda that's nearly 100 years old. For this country, of course, it's 43 years old because we've been in the European Union since 1973. Edward Heath lied to take us into the European Union, or the European Economic Community as it was back then, And I readily acknowledge, you know, I fell for it hook, line and sinker. I was 18 years old. It was the first opportunity that I had to vote in that, was it May of 1975. And I voted to join or to remain in. I mean, we thought we were voting to join, but of course we were already in. But I voted to remain in the EEC. Because of my in-depth analysis, i.e. none, I simply fell for the rhetoric that was being pumped out. But now we have no excuse, because now, you know, we have 43 years of experience of what membership of the European Union brings, and, you know, there's still a lot of things that are not common knowledge, but need to become common knowledge. Ideally before June the 23rd, because this may well be the last opportunity that the people of this country have to remain anything that pretends to be a democracy. Because is there anybody here who thinks the EU is a democracy? Oh, good, I'm amongst a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Of course the EU is not a democracy. The European Parliament has literally zero legislative powers. It's a talking shop. It's meant to provide the media entertainment to create the impression around Europe that there is an element of consultation in this non-existent democratic process. Anybody want to tell me who makes European law? Now, we've been a member of this state for 43 years. So come on, surely somebody can tell me who initiates European law. Right, well that should be your first clue. And that, by the way, is quite possibly the first question that needs to be asked of anybody who thinks that it's a good idea to stay in. Who makes the laws? Somebody's phone going off down here? It's not mine. The reality is that officially, it is the European Commission in collusion with the Council of Ministers who initiate the European law. In reality, it's the bureaucrats, and it's the lobbyists who nurture those bureaucrats. They nurture them with bribery, money, brown paper bags. So they work out who are the influential bureaucrats, who has most clout, and then they make sure that they effectively own them. And then the bureaucrats submit, because they know how to, they submit the proposition for legislation to the European Commission, or to the Secretariat of the European Commission, and then it filters its way through, it's rubber stamped by the European Commission, the Council of Ministers. The European Parliament isn't even told what laws are being introduced. It's up to the researchers who work for the MEPs to do their own study and find out what laws are being implemented and then to debate them. But they don't get to debate them with any influence, it's just a charade. So, to vote to remain in the EU is to vote for the absolute end of any democratic process and to throw our lot, effectively, into the arena that's controlled by lobbyists who know how to schmooze the bureaucrats. So here's here he is, Edward Heath. I mean, the lies and the deceit that this guy told are now very well documented for anybody who wants to take a look at it. Here we have the debate. And I don't think there is really any kind of demographic that's going one way or the other. Because there are, certainly I've spoken to people, who are pensioners, and I've spoken to people who want to stay in, and spoken to people who want to come out, and the same with the youth. But there is a fundamental difference, an absolute fundamental difference. When you actually start to ask people why they want to stay in, they really don't have any substance to offer to support that decision. But when you ask people why it is that they want to leave, they can normally give you 3, 4, 5, 6 or more reasons why it is they need to leave. So the people that want to leave are clearly those, in my opinion, and I'm generalising of course, but they're clearly those people who have done the research and want to stay out because of that. So, there we go, there's the lobbyists. And do you know why Parliament is empty for much of the week? In fact, the only time in any week that Parliament is anything like full is 12 noon on a Wednesday. Do you know what happens at 12 noon on a Wednesday? Prime Minister's Questions. And the reason that they want to be there is because they know damn well that a greater percentage of the population will actually watch Prime Minister's Questions, either live or the snippets on the news. So of course they all want to be there. But there's no reason for them to be there because actually even before we joined the EU, one of the criteria for membership to join the European Economic Community, as we were told it was that Britain subjugated itself to EU law. So a year before we joined the EEC, in 1972, the European Communities Act was passed, which gives decisions of the European courts precedent over British law. So the reason that Parliament looks like this most of the time is because this is just a charade. It's a charade to keep the people thinking that there is some kind of democratic process out there, when there is none. Absolutely none. It's to actually create a document, Hansard, which is, it might as well be a work of fiction. So there's the 12 noon, where they're climbing over each other to get onto the camera. But it's meaningless. It's the total charade. When the democratic process, the charade of the process, is maintained on so many levels. We have petitions, but probably the most extreme example is people handing petitions into 10 Downing Street. And coincidentally, or ironically, yesterday I watched a film that I didn't even know existed. It's a new release, and it's a film called Reg Keys. And it's the story of Reg Keys, and of course standing against Tony Blair in the 2005 general election. And there's a scene in there that absolutely epitomises the ridiculous situation of these petitions that are handed into 10 Downing Street every 15 minutes of every day. It's called a social safety valve. So in other words, people can think that by signing a petition that they're going to make a difference. What happens is that people who compile these petitions, of course, they're all very well-meaning, and then you get a group of people and you go up to 10 Downing Street at your allotted time, you get through security, you get to the gate, you've got 15 minutes. And the idea of you having 15 minutes is to make the most of the photographic opportunities or the press that are there. And then you get to knock on the door, and this guy in a crisp white shirt and a tie. I've never understood why a male willingly puts a noose around their neck every morning.
The leash.
Yes, the leash. Yeah, absolutely. As I said that, I was doing a quick scan to make sure nobody had a tie around. So this guy in the crisp white shirt and the tie comes to the door and he says, "Thank you very much. I'll make sure Mr. Cameron gets it immediately." And of course, as soon as the door shuts, it's like, it's in the bin. It's in the bin. It served the purpose. It's the social safety valve creating the impression that there is some interest in what the public think when there's none whatsoever. And of course, the big issue for people right now is this: immigration. Now, let me make a few observations because I don't want to be taken out of context or misconstrued. The UK is a multicultural society, right? And there's no question that the UK benefits from being a multicultural society. But there is an agenda which has been in place since the 1920s to destroy the national identity of all European countries. And by the way, this is now being extended into the US. Now, the US has always been a melting pot, but the idea is to accelerate it beyond anything that any American has ever seen. This guy, anyone recognise this guy? No? This is Peter Sutherland. Peter Sutherland. Very interesting guy, but anyway, let's cut to the quick. He's an Irishman, he's former Attorney General of the Irish government, the youngest Attorney General ever to be appointed in Ireland, and following that he became a European Commissioner. He headed up the GATT talks, the General Agreement on Trade Tariffs. Because of that, he became the founding Director General of the World Trade Organization. He's former chairman of BP, he's still chairman of Goldman Sachs International. He was on the board of the Royal Bank of Scotland when it collapsed. He was asked to leave at that point, with a big payoff. So, a very well-connected individual. And he gave an interview to the BBC on the 21st of June 2012, where he stated categorically that the EU should undermine national homogeneity. And he was following this up after giving a presentation in the House of Lords, where he said, we still nurse a sense of our homogeneity and difference from others, and that's precisely what the European Union, in my view, should be doing its best to undermine. This is not just in this country, it's every country. Sarkozy, when he was president of France, actually went on TV and said it was a national responsibility to mix the races. And he encouraged Frenchmen to interbreed with the immigrants coming into the country. He wasn't doing it because he believed himself, necessarily, that was a good thing. It was the agenda that he signed up for. Mandelson himself said, immigrants, we sent out search parties to get them to come and made it hard for Britons to get work. Part of this agenda is to destroy the middle classes, to destroy the working classes. The whole idea is to create basically a two-class system. Effectively, the aristocracy and the technocrats, i.e. those who run the corporations, and the underclass. The underclass. More people in this country are on minimum wage than ever before. More people in this country are on 0 hours contracts than ever before. Fewer people are participating in company pension schemes than ever before. Fewer people are entitled to benefits such as sick pay or holiday pay than ever before. And the EU, which we've been a member of for 43 years, is going to protect our employee rights. Yeah.